All right, good morning. How is everybody? Good. Excited? Awesome. Okay, so if you have not been to our building before, just first things first, the bathrooms are down the hall, and the Scion Exchange will be after all of this, and it'll be all the way down the hall on your left, so you're oriented. I'm Ashley Troth. I am the horticulture agent here with Durham County Cooperative Extension. Super excited to have you all here today. We'll be hearing from a couple of master gardeners and myself. This is an annual event for us, so if you are enjoying yourself and you want to do it again, we'll probably be doing it again next year. And also the Scion Exchange will be happening again next year as well. So if you get home and you're like, that was great, I need more, don't worry, there will be more. And really quickly, Allie is one of our Extension Master Gardener volunteers, and you wanted to make a quick announcement?
Yes, I will be photographing the workshop. If you have an extreme aversion to being photographed, you can just raise your hand right now. Otherwise, would love to have your smiling faces in these photos. Okay, awesome, I got you. Okay.
Don't worry. We typically just use photos to be like, it was great. So that's what we use photos for. Yeah, like everyone had fun. But if Allie is coming around and you're not into it and you didn't even want to raise your hand, you can kind of bop her at that moment and be like,
exactly.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Just don't hit too hard.
Yeah, verbally bop. So with that, I would like to hand it over to our first presenter. We'll be hearing from Kat Causey, a very experienced master gardener and fruit tree queen, who is an expert in all things fruit tree, and she'll be doing our first presentation.
No pressure. Hi, as y'all know, I'm Kat. I've been a master gardener for over 20 years and an orchardist almost that long. Seems like longer. So the other day I was doing the annual task of pruning. If you have grown fruit trees, you know about this. And my husband, bless his heart, he was out there picking up all the discards, which you know is a thankless task. And he started asking me, why are you pruning? You know, it's 20 degrees, it's in January, he's bending down constantly picking stuff up. So, because he's a captive audience, and I knew I was giving this talk in a few weeks, I gave him the short and sweet version. Y'all get the longer version. So, today that's what we're going to cover, is winter and summer pruning. Trust me, it is short. It is very high level. We're not going to get into the real nitty gritty. But I'm sure his eyes were rolling back in his head because growing fruit trees is my passion, not his. He's just stuck with me. All right, so today we're going to talk about summer and winter pruning. This is what we all want. Not always what we get. So what I want to do is talk about tools. You have to have tools. And I start out, I can't even, oh, there we go. Handy dandy hand pruners. They are what you ultimately want to use because you've properly pruned your fruit trees in the past. That's not always what happens with me. So then we have loppers. They are for the thicker branches or the higher up ones. When you're less than 5 feet like me, you use these a lot more. But then sometimes my hands get tired, so I just, at the recommendation of a friend, I just bought battery-powered pruners, and they are guaranteed to take up branches up to an inch thick, but they will also take fingers. So be very, very careful with these.
Have you tried that one yet? Because I was going to buy it.
And last, but well, let me start. I'm sure you've all seen pruning saws. These prune back and forth when you're pruning thicker branches. They are wonderful But again, if you get tired and you've got a lot of trees to prune like I do, then you graduate to the electric stuff or the battery powered stuff. And last but not least, this is my little chainsaw. Don't ever let your trees get to the point where you need a chainsaw. I learned by doing. So I have had to use this in the past because I don't thin my fruit enough, or, you know, it was a really brutal winter and a branch broke. So I have had to use my little chainsaw. I love it. But what I recommend first, because we all prune, or I hope we do, clean your tools. Start out with clean tools. You can use rubbing alcohol in between trees, or if you have had fire blight in the past, you want to use it between cuts. That is very important. Even in the winter time when disease is quiet, it is not as prevalent as it is in the summertime. You want to clean your tools between cuts. You can use rubbing alcohol, or this is my favorite, Lysol. And I use it, or any disinfectant that says 99.9% that kills 99.9% of viruses and bacteria. And it's a very convenient can, and I spray between cuts. So those are the necessary tools. And what I recommend on timing is prune when the tree is dormant. That is so important. The tree is asleep, so they're not going to pay that much attention to, oh my God, I've just had a branch, this necessary branch taken off. Just like they would not operate on you without anesthesia, you don't want to do any kind of pruning, heavy pruning, unless the tree is dormant. And there's also less disease pressure in the winter time. Like I said earlier, fungus, bacteria are more asleep, they're less prevalent, so you're not spreading disease as much as you would if you're pruning in the summertime. So the first thing you want to do is decide, is this an apple or pear tree, or is this a peach, an apricot, or a plum? When you decide, when you know you have decided what tree you're going to work on, then you decide what shape you want your tree to be. And that means that if it's an apple or a pear, you want it to be in the shape of a Christmas tree. You want a strong trunk, and you want branches to come out shorter on the top, wider on the bottom. You want strong branches, so you want to take off, as you see right here, we're taking off, this is the first year we're taking off any branches that might compete with the central leader. The second year, we're taking off any branches that are underneath, they're shaded, or they might be shading any fruit that might be maybe developing. And then on year 3 and following years, we want to take off any inside branches that are growing toward the center of the tree that might compete with other branches. And that's really important, that you try to remove any shading or shaded branches. We want to make sure there's plenty of airflow and plenty of sunshine. Your tree will thank you. Less disease. If you have air circulation, any fungal spores will dry. They won't spread as prevalently as they would normally. And the sunshine, once you start getting the fruit developing, The sunshine helps the fruit develop. It turns the apples redder. It also will make the sugar develop better. So those are important things to think about. Like I said, don't ever let it get to the point where you need a chainsaw. Do this, you know, as the tree develops, and you will have a good shape from now on. So purposes for central leader pruning, it determines the size of the tree, and it determines the health of the tree. It produces strong side branches. As you can see for like this branch right here, when you get a heavy apple load, it can break a branch. Another time we'll talk about thinning, which is always important too, but that's another chore and another talk. And it, like I said, it increases sunlight penetration.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I may be the remedial learner, but like if I go to like Lowe's and I buy a tree, apple tree that's in one of their cans or whatever, and I put it into the ground in my yard, am I supposed to, because I don't know the history of pruning, am I supposed to immediately start pruning it, or am I supposed to let it grow a little bit and then prune it, and then follow the steps that you're talking about? Could you kind of maybe back up to when you get a tree, what you're supposed to do with it when you first get it?
Yes. Let me get back. There we go. Okay, this is year 1. So you want to take off where you've got buds that you want a branch to come out. So I would take it off about right there because I want a branch to come out. You will take it off above a bud, about 1/4 inch above a bud. And that's where, when it starts growing in the springtime, that's where it will start developing a branch. The central leader will continue to grow, but now you have told the tree, I want branches there.
Thank you.
Good question. So here's another example, a simpler version of a central leader pruning. And you see where we got kind of drastic. We removed, those are competing branches. They're too close. So we've got this branch and we've got this branch. But we have, you know, this is coming off the main trunk, but it's going to be shaded. So we are removing smaller branches that will be competing with any scaffold. That's a scaffold, that's a scaffold, and we want about 12 to 18 inches between scaffolds. Scaffolds are going to be where you want the fruit to develop. Those branches will get thicker and they'll be stronger. All right, so let's talk about open center pruning. Your peaches, your apricots, your plums. To me, this is easier to do because when you're working with, in the wintertime, we have no leaves, we can see the skeleton of the tree. So we know how to shape it better. Again, you want to take off that because you do not want a central leader. We want it to open up like this. Like if I took off my head, we want it to look like that. And then we continue to do that. This is how we do open center pruning. And anything that's growing inward that will shade the center, we take off in the 2nd year and all following years. We don't want it shaded, so it's growing underneath, and we don't want it growing toward the center where it will be shaded again. These will be shading. So just some examples of where, again, a more simplified version of open center. You can see how busy this one is, and trust me, when you're growing peaches, plums, apricots, they're vigorous. They like to grow. So you will find yourself pruning out, cleaning out the center every late winter. The timing for pruning is right before bud break. So when you're pruning, You can prune earlier, but the tree, you want to prune just before the tree really starts getting vigorous in the springtime. I've already been pruning. I've got over 70 trees. I prune when I have the chance. And it's a long process. So what the rules of pruning is, there are 3 important rules. I start with the 3 Ds: dead, diseased, or damaged. You can always see the dead branches. Get rid of those, they're not necessary, they just get in the way. Diseased, always, you want to get rid of that. And if you have fire blight in the past, remember, we want to clean between each cut, because fire blight can spread from apples to pears. It's not a disease of stone fruit, but it is definitely a killer of apples and pears. I've lost trees because of it.
What does it look like? I'm not familiar with
It is like a canker. You will see, when fire blight occurs, it usually occurs on new growth in the springtime, and it looks like a shepherd's hook. Your young branches will start doing that.
Oh.
And it turns black. And it looks like you have just put fire under it, and then the branch is suffering for that. You need to cut back 10 to 12 inches below that, because it will travel through the vascular system and it will attack further down into the tree.
Gotcha.
So make your cuts. Oh, wait, I want to get back to when you prune. We're talking about the 3 Ds. Next, I would recommend that if you have any of those pesky growths that come out from right about the root around the tree, you want to get rid of those. Those are root suckers. They take energy from the tree and they reduce the amount of air circulation. So those are easy to do and easy to see. And the next thing I work on is removing the excess growth, like we've done here. So those are my 3 rules when I prune. And if you think of it that simplistic, it helps when you're actually doing the job. But one caution: excessive winter pruning can create excessive vigor in the springtime. So don't take more than 25 to 30% of your tree. That's real important, because otherwise your tree's going to go, oh no, I need more branches, or I need more leaves, and it will really jump ahead, and then you'll have more pruning you have to do. So, and the timing, like I've said before, is when the tree is dormant. So make your cuts to an outward facing bud. Y'all know what buds are, right? Okay, we have the little nub on each branch. You want the bud to be facing outward, because that's where we're going to get leaves, and that's where we're going to get more branches. We want it to grow in the direction we want it to. We're just being kind to our tree. So if an unwanted branch is coming out from the trunk, we want to make sure we never cut into the branch collar. The branch collar is like the turtleneck. You know, when we wear turtlenecks, we have wrinkles. We never want to cut into that. If we cut into that, it keeps the tree from healing itself. So we want to cut outside of the branch collar. And what will happen is the tree will go, okay, I've lost something here. But what it will do is start growing, rolling inward, and you can actually see a bit of growth coming, and it will start closing itself up. That, and never, ever paint a wound. That reduces the ability of the tree to heal itself, and if you do it right, it can heal itself. But you never want to paint a wound.
What about putting wax?
I'm sorry?
And what about putting wax like a?
I would not put anything on it. The tree actually, it does a good job of healing itself if we cut in the right place. The benefits of pruning in the winter is because you can see the skeleton of the tree. It's best for structural development, and it develops the trees to be stronger and happier. And it's ideal for young trees or neglected trees. I know about the neglected trees. It stimulates vigorous growth when the tree wakes up, and it improves air circulation and reduces diseases when it, by letting in sunlight, and it improves fruit quality. Remember the sugars? So, okay, now let's turn this on its head. We're going to talk about summer pruning, and for that, the reason for summer pruning is because our tree has a lot of vigorous growth. What I find to be the trees that get the most vigorous would be the stone fruit, the ones that want the open center pruning. They start growing inward, they start putting out a lot of leaves, and they're blocking the center of the tree, the air circulation in the sunlight. So that's what we want to do, is slow the growth by removing the center of the tree. The timing is I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, will you always have to do summer pruning for stone fruits, or is that something you would only do if perhaps you prune too much in the winter and you get that vigorous growth?
I find stone fruit have a lot of vigorous growth, but no, you don't always have to.
Okay.
I find my plums don't need to be pruned quite as often as the peaches do.
Gotcha.
But that's
Depend on the tree.
your experience may vary.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Okay, so the timing, aim for the summer solstice around around June 20 to 21st, never past the middle of July. And the reason for that is because your tree is still going to grow it's awake and it's happy and it's getting food and sunshine and it's gonna grow. But if you prune after about mid-July, you'll still have new growth happening, but it won't have time to harden off to get ready for the long sleep in the wintertime. So you don't want to prune too late. And if you prune too early, you could reduce the photosynthesis that the fruit and the leaves need in order to develop fruit. And it also reduces nutrient uptake, and we want our trees to be healthy. All right, so avoid pruning when the rain is in the forecast. Moisture from the rain can stir up fungal spores. We don't want that to happen. Again, first clean your tools. I'm sorry, you were gonna?
And on a windy day, like today?
I prune even on a windy day because I find it's hard to, my orchard is an hour and a half away. So I have to take advantage of sunshine and, not freezing to death. Disease is very active in the warmer months. So if you don't disinfect your tools between trees, then you're just spreading disease. So we don't want to do that. And caution, well, I've already cautioned you about fire blight. Never take more than 1/3 of the tree's canopy. On the central leader, avoid heavy pruning in the summer. That's just it. It doesn't really need it. You can prune out weaker branches and any damaged wood, and that's mainly all we do in the summertime. Open center, you prune out the growth that has filled in the center of the tree. To wrap up, the way I see it is winter pruning is for health. Summer pruning is for height. If you want to reduce the height of your tree and keep it a smaller tree, You can do that by pruning in the summertime. A tree, if you prune your tree in the wintertime, it stimulates growth. If you prune it in the summer, it reduces growth. Visibility is better in the winter than it is in the summer, and your primary goal in the winter is health and structure. In the summer, size controls and fruit quality. So remember, apple and pear trees need central leader, a strong trunk. And peaches, nectarines, and apricots need open center pruning. So always remember to protect the branch collar, use clean and sharp tools to reduce damage to yourself and to your tree, and annual gentle pruning is always best. Pruning is intimidating, even for me, but you can do this and your tree will be happier for it. All you're doing is loving your tree. Any questions? Yes, sir.
You've said it a couple of times, but can you talk about why apple trees want the central leader versus stone fruit trees having an open center? Like, why is it?
That is their natural growth. So we don't want to try to have them grow in a manner in which it is not their natural state. So what we're doing is just helping them be stronger and better. But as far as, I work with the structure of the tree. And that's what we should be doing when we're pruning. Any other questions? Sure.
I know there's so many fruits that we could talk about, but do you have experience with persimmons?
Persimmons are more of a central leader. At least that's been my experience. Yes, sir?
From the angle of the cut on the pruning, is there any?
Good point. I forgot to bring that up. Yes, sir. You need your branches to be at least 45 degrees, and because 60 degrees is better. Not a narrow crotch. And pears are very prone to growing more upright, so you need limb spreaders that will, when they're young, that will bring your limbs to a less upright position. Yes, ma'am.
Have you noticed, I don't know if you grow Liberty, William Pride, pristine apples, they all tend to lend themselves better. I've tried to force them into an upright structure and they just want to be wide, so I just gave up after 3 years and grew them like my peaches.
Sometimes you cannot fight
Yeah.
what the tree wants to do, but yes, I do grow 2 of those,
Yeah.
but I don't find that that's the case.
Oh, interesting.
You know, it could be just your tree is,
Yeah.
they have their own minds.
Mhm.
At least I'm convinced they do. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I have the issue of sapsucker that is destroying the.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what should I do about those branches that have been affected by the sapsucker?
Sometimes you can put like some kind of netting around the trunk of the tree, because they usually do that in the winter time. What they're doing is they're going after, you know, some of the bugs in the trees. I have a tree that is badly worked on, and it's still producing. I have not wrapped it, I should, but I figure at this point, the tree's probably 18 years old and it's still producing, and, you know, as long as he doesn't start working on the rest of my trees, I'll let him have one. Okay, thank y'all very much. I would like, Ashley is,
All right, so we are gonna talk next about choosing trees in a changing climate. And so I will admit that I am very much a plant biologist, and so I know enough about fruit trees to like play this on TV. But occasionally, if you have questions, I might defer to Kat. But so much of what we think about when we think about choosing plants, fruit trees, anything for a changing climate, it's basic plant biology that we have to be really taking into account, and we have to understand kind of how the climate is changing, and how we need to be making decisions kind of in response to that. So just to orient you to what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk very briefly about what climate change is going to look like in this area, and we're already experiencing it. Like, we act like this is, no, we're here. This is happening. And so some of this we're already very much seeing. And we're going to go through very specifically 3 things to think about. And we're going to talk about both the challenge and why that is a challenge for plants, and then what some of the solutions are and recommendations we have. So we're going to go problem solution for roots and water, dealing with heat and humidity, and then specifically to fruit trees, thinking about chilling hours, which is a kind of a fruit tree specific phenomenon in the way we think about it. And then at the end, I'll have some kind of closing remarks on, I just gave you a lot of conflicting advice, right? Like, how do you integrate that? And for any of you who are experienced orchardists or gardeners, you will know that typically when you start digging into any topic, the advice is conflicting. And you hear like 15 different things from 15 different angles, and what you have to do is you just have to balance it and figure out what you're most concerned about and what you need to prioritize the best. So if you come away from this being like, that's fine, this is an art and a science, and the only way you're going to learn it is by doing it, so get out there and kill some trees. So life in a changing climate, what is this going to look like? First off, and we're seeing so much of this already, we're going to have changes in precipitation patterns. We might actually end up getting slightly more precipitation than we get now, but what the reality of it is, our water is going to become much more sporadic. So we will have drought and deluge, right? We will have too much and too little, and you already know this from your own garden that we just have periods where there's nothing, and then there was like that period last year where we almost floated away, right? We're also going to have higher temperatures, and this we'll talk about specifically in kind of the middle section, but this is really, really important because not only are our daytime temperatures going up, but also our nighttime temperatures. And when we think about plants, actually, in some ways, nighttime temperatures can be even more dramatic than daytime temperatures, and we'll talk about why that is, right? So also our winters are getting a lot more erratic, which is hard, because when we talk about chilling hours, that will become obvious why that's even more of a problem for fruit trees. Before we dive into any of that, because I'm going to be talking about rootstock a fair bit, I just want to go through some super basic grafting stuff for anyone who's kind of new to this. So when we think about grafting, and this is very, very common in fruit trees, it's actually common in a lot of other ornamentals as well, like roses and that kind of stuff, but we really think about it for fruit trees. The scion is this top portion of the plant, and it gives you the fruit quality that you want, right? It gives you the flowers, the fruit, all the genetics of that control what that fruit's going to be like. The rootstock is down here, and they were grafted together, so someone literally like Frankensteined them, right? They cut them in half and just smushed them together, and it took, which is awesome. That's right, smushed. That's the technical scientific term. It confers disease resistance, plant size, some pest resistance, a lot of these different things. And what I want to point out to you, and that's very interesting about this, is that oftentimes rootstocks are developed by researchers for one trait, right? So a lot of the apple rootstocks were developed to control size of the mature plant. And now increasingly people are going back and researching those same rootstocks that we already know and finding that they have impacts on other traits too. Right, so and we'll talk about this in the water use section. A lot of, for example, the apple rootstocks were recently surveyed for water use efficiency, right? So there are known rootstocks that we might be figuring out, that were developed by researchers, that we might be figuring out new things about what they do, just because like when they were developed, they were looking over here, and they didn't realize if they had benefits or problems over here. So it's always worth kind of like searching around on that kind of stuff and keeping up to date with it. Yeah.
Are you saying you could take the rootstock of an apple and put it with the scion of a pear?
No. No, but I could put it with another apple, and I could put a pear with something else that was closely related. And so Sarah will talk about that in her section, but you typically have to be within the same genus, and you ideally want to be within the same species to know it's really good. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff you can do. Sorry, it's just fun to be decisive. And so some native species are not grafted or only sometimes grafted, and that's something to know about. But even then, oftentimes if you're buying commercial native species, like commercial fruit trees that are native species, Oftentimes they are still grafted because we just know we can get benefits. Okay, so we all feel like we've got the scion rootstock distinction. So thinking about roots, oftentimes when we think about soil in terms of particle size, sand, silt, clay, whatever. We have clay. Some of us are very fortunate and we have clay, sand, and we still gripe and moan about it because everybody wants some mythical soil that is perfect, myself included. Clay is actually really great because it has a lot of nutrients in it. The problem with clay is that we think about our soil in terms of the fact that it's made up of clay. But the other really important part of it is how is all of that organized, right? And what we really want from our soil is we actually want our soil to be about 50% stuff, clay, organic matter, sand, whatever it is, and about 50% space, right? And that space is made up of air and water. So we think about just sand, silt, and clay, but what we're actually thinking about is how all of that's organized together, right? So you've got sand particles and clay particles and organic matter particles, and is there space in between, what we call pores, for air and water to move? Water is essential because plants actually get nutrients through the water from the soil. Clay is awesome because there's a lot of nutrients. And air is important because the roots need to breathe. And so in many of our soils, we have highly compacted clay soils, or if we have sand, we have soil that drains way too quickly and actually doesn't hold water at all. In either case, adding organic matter is part of the solution, right? We need to think about how we improve our soils. And so many of the times when I see failing fruit trees, it's foundational. The soil, right? They are planted in clay soil with poor drainage and they're drowning, right? They just can't make it. And it's like I don't even need to know what's going on up here because I can just look at that tree and I can look how it's planted and the soil it's in, and I know it didn't stand a chance. Right? Remember, these trees, so many of them, are not native to this region. They are from wildly different places. Even though it seems very natural to just plant a tree in the soil, if that tree evolved in the mountains of China, there is nothing natural about planting it here, right? So we need to give it the soil it needs. So what do we do here? You kind of have two options. You have two things, and I would actually encourage you to do both. You can improve your soil. Adding organic matter improves both clay and sandy soils. Organic matter spaces out clay soils, helps them drain better, and it actually helps sandy soils hold water better. So it brings everything kind of to this middle, right, of proper drainage. So I'm going to give you an answer that's delightfully non-specific, because whether you want to add mulch that will break down into compost, you want to add compost, it could be leaf compost, something you make yourself, it can be pine bark fines, they all break down into really similar structures. And so you can go out and you can buy compost, certified compost. That's a great way to add organic matter, but you could also make your own. Or you could add, and the reason I'm saying that is because it's like all of these things actually are going to operate the same in the long run, and people can often get really hung up on like which one, and what I'm telling you is like, what do you have? Try using that. And if you don't have anything, just go buy out and buy bulk compost, and you can incorporate it into the top couple inches of your soil when you're planting, or if your trees are already planted, you almost like mulch with it, and it'll go down into the soil. You can also improve your drainage. Incorporating organic matter helps improve your drainage actually in the long run. You can plant up, right? So we do this with our fruits and veggies. We can do it with our fruit trees too. If you go out to the Briggs Avenue Community Garden, which we help manage, or which Extension manages, all those fruit trees are planted on berms, right? So you don't even need the cute box. You just need a hill of real soil. Not organic matter, real soil, right? So you go out and you buy topsoil, you do this, and you plant that tree up. You know, if you want a cute box, that's fine. I'm just saying you don't have to have it. You can do it however you want, or plant it on a spot on your property that you know you never see standing water, you know that soil's never waterlogged. You can incorporate things like permatil or horticultural sand. What I'm talking about is rough, gritty material that, again, you also mix into that top couple inches of soil because you're just trying to get drainage. These trees need drainage, right? There are very few of them that will tolerate what we call wet feet. And this is the thing that'll kill your tree before anything else we talk about. Some rootstocks might confer drought resilience. So we were talking, Kat and I were talking about this, and this is where I actually found this research study that came out in 2021, that bud 9 is actually a rootstock people like for apples because it creates dwarf trees. Recent research has shown that it does confer some level of drought resilience, right? Because this is like the perverse part of this story. I'm telling you, oh my God, your trees are going to drown, but we know there's going to be droughtier periods too. So you actually want trees that can kind of handle either, and some of the rootstocks they're going back and re-examining and they're finding have some of this drought resilience as well. Note I said resilience, not resistance, right? Drought can still kill things. And then the other thing I really, really recommend, and this is crazy, but I think most people who have been at this for a while get here, plant it and water it for the first year. And then if it gets real droughty, maybe you water a little bit more, but you actually want things to fail quickly. You do not want to water something diligently and kindly for 5 years, and then you go on vacation the wrong week, and it dies, right? Because that watering can prop up a plant that's not really matched properly and isn't really getting what it needs. But you don't have a well-rooted, strong plant, and I would rather have something crash out early and just replace it or come up with a new plan than have this like delicate house of cards, right, that I have to be constantly maintaining. Like, I want to know if something's going to fail. So you do you. Some of us are harder-hearted than others. But the longer I'm at this, the more I'm like, it's up to you, plants. It's up to you. I tried. Okay, so that's a little bit about roots and water. Moving forward to thinking about heat and humidity, we're actually going to take a little sidebar and talk about tree biology basics, and this applies to all photosynthesizing plants. So plants are amazing in that they are able to use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide to sugar, right? This is the process of photosynthesis. They literally are taking carbon dioxide from the air, and they're taking water from the soil, and they're making sugars, and they're giving off oxygen, right? This is the vast majority of the material you see on a plant is the carbon that they're pulling straight from the air through photosynthesis. They then use that energy to build all of their bodies, all their structures, their flowers, their fruit, all these things we like, to survive, to reproduce, right? So what we think about this is photosynthesis is how you make energy, and everything else is how you use energy, right? So this is like the metabolism of the plant and building its body, okay? So while all of that's happening, plants also have a lot of mechanisms to cool themselves and to kind of deal with environmental stressors. And so what they do through transpiration is they take water up through their roots, it goes up through their leaves, and it literally evaporates off. It's like sweating. You can imagine it's the plant version of sweating, right? Where they're letting water out through their leaves and it cools the plant's body. It's very, very efficient. A mature oak tree does this with like tens of thousands of gallons of water every year, right? Massively efficient. But the way that they let that water off is through these tiny, tiny, tiny little specialized structures on their leaves called stomata, right? That can open and close. They're like little mouths, right? And when they're open, they can let in CO2 for photosynthesis, and they can let off water for sweating and transpiration and cooling. But when it gets really hot, or when the plant gets drought stressed, it's going to close them, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I don't have enough water, shut it down, right? But when they're closed, what can they also not do?
Transpiration.
Let in CO2. Photosynthesis shuts down too, right? So the hotter and the more stress the plant gets, it's got to protect its water. As a byproduct, photosynthesis gets stopped as well, or at least drastically slowed. So stomata close when it's too hot, stopping photosynthesis, and then no energy is being made for that plant to grow or defend itself, right? But all the growth and the defense still has to happen. There's just no energy for it. So this is what happens with our hot days. You're fine. This is what happens with our hot days. It gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and metabolism keeps going, but photosynthesis shuts down. That plant doesn't have the energy to defend itself, it doesn't have the energy to fruit properly, it doesn't have the energy to do any of that. And at night, that stress continues, right? So metabolism is still very fast, it's still happening at night, obviously no photosynthesis is happening, and so we have this kind of real double whammy of like, it's very hot during the day, the plant can't do what it needs to do, but it still has to build its body and defend itself. And then at night, which is a time when like metabolically the plants tend to relax a little bit, that doesn't happen either, right? So you kind of have this runaway train of metabolism with nothing to back it up. This is why our plants get really stressed, right? So like if you look at our USDA hardiness zone, it's very similar to some areas out in Oregon where there are like massive sod farms and beautiful nurseries and it's like lush and organic and green and wonderful in all ways. That is not what our summers look like, right? And part of that's our hot summer nights and just the really high temperatures we get. Because USDA hardiness zone is about freezing temperatures. It's not about that craziness you experience in the summer, okay? So, what can we do for our plants given that we know they're dealing with all of this heat and humidity? Humidity is great for disease, heat is terrible for plants, right? They have this double whammy. So, part of what I would encourage you to do is like make it easy on yourself. We actually have a number of species and varieties around here that can handle kind of what we're throwing at them. And if you are someone who's like interested in having some fruit, but this might not become your lifestyle, I would really encourage you to think about things like figs, blueberries, muscadine. Some of these are native as well, right? So that's really phenomenal. We all know that like we all have that neighbor with a fig tree that is just bulletproof and huge, and they don't do anything for it, and they're trying to give you figs every summer, right? Like that's a very attractive notion of having a fruit tree to me. Okay, so that's one option. As you start with those plants, I would work your way up into things like apples, and I think peaches are especially difficult, or can be. And if you're gonna grow things like apples and peaches, right, where imagine, what is an apple or a peach really? It is a huge, massive, sugary ball that the plant had to produce all that sugar by pulling all that carbon out of the air, and you're asking it to do it when it was like from Kazakhstan originally. Right? Right? So these are really hard for trees to grow, but it's possible. What I will say though is that if you're going to be growing some of those more conventional fruits, reset your expectations or commit to a really aggressive spray schedule, which most of us don't want to do. So if you're very excited to have the kind of apples that will look great in a pie, that's possible. If you're hoping to have like grocery store just eating apples, that's why we have grocery stores, right? Just reset your expectations, right? You'll get enough that you'll be happy. They won't be terribly attractive. It's fine. You'll cut out the brown spots and you'll try not to see whatever else is growing on them, and it'll be delicious.
I know for peaches, like I have to spray for fungal diseases in the spring before they bud out. What other kind of?
There often are multiple waves with these crops of different sprays you can do, and we can share spray schedules with you, but it's often like there's a flowering spray, there's a pre-harvest spray, there might be whatever else is going. There's these waves of things, and there often are not really great organic options.
Yeah, I would love to see that schedule, because unfortunately I found the extension put out a chart with like the difficulty of various fruit trees. I bought my peach trees and then realized peach was literally the worst thing I could have planted, and I'm a novice orchardist.
Yeah,
so
I can show you the spray schedule, and I would also just work on acceptance.
Oh, I've accepted it.
Oh,
I'm there.
But yeah, do we have another?
Here, but I can tell you about the Cummings nursery. They really work on selecting disease-resistant apples.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some. I as a government employee, I can't vouch for anyone specifically, but there are some very good nurseries in the area that can help with this. And I'll talk a little bit about some of that in my wrap-up slide too. Other ideas of things that you might not have thought of before but can be quite nice are some of the Asian pear varieties, persimmons. We do have a native persimmon. It's great if you don't mind picking fruit off the ground and getting a lot of seeds out of stuff.
It needs heavy pruning.
Yeah, it's like fine. Like I'm not gonna knock them. Like they're great, they're native, that's cool, they have really cool attributes. But one of the things that you can see that often is really good is Asian persimmons grafted onto our native rootstock, because you get kind of all that benefit of a native plant, but you get some of the really nice attributes of some of the Asian persimmons. And then finally pawpaws, which I always have to mention, because we're originally from Indiana, and we always used to call them the Indiana banana. They're wild, they have like no shelf life, right? That's why that's not been turned into a commercially viable fruit. But they are native, and when they're younger, they tolerate a little bit more shade and they tolerate a little bit more water. I would also encourage you to think about improved varieties of some of our known and loved fruits. Heritage and heirloom varieties can be very tricky. The story is always very nice. The trees are beautiful and somehow in someone else's orchard. The vision is great. They're hard though, right? These are trees that were often developed more for flavor than for anything else, which means that often flavor is good at the expense of disease resistance. And they were often developed for a climate that existed 50 to 100 years ago. Right? So I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying maybe you get that and something else, right? Take advantage of improved varieties and rootstocks. So many of our land-grant institutions and other research groups kind of across the Southeast are still coming up with new varieties all the time, right? Coming up with innovations that don't necessarily make that flavor disease resistance trade-off, right? Where you can get a little bit better for both. So for example, Auburn has come out with a whole plum series that have different attributes, different disease resistances, different flavor profiles, right? The Auburn plums are really amazing. This is actually Auburn rubrum right here. It's self-fertile as well. Take advantage of rootstocks. So Guardian is a really excellent rootstock for plums and other stone fruits. This will give you a little bit of nematode resistance if that's a concern. G11 is another kind of smaller rootstock for apples that will give you mild flower blight resistance. But in general, if you're interested, one of the best practices when you're selecting your fruit trees is that we absolutely can, like a big box store will sell you a fruit tree for sure. And also if you go online and you look at nurseries, you can find specific combinations of scions and rootstocks, and you can be picking based on the rootstock you want. Which what I would do is I would start out by researching what are my concerns, what do I want to grow, what is the rootstock that will benefit me for what I want to grow, and I would find an acceptable scion on that rootstock, right? Like I wouldn't start by being like, I want this exact apple variety for the fruit. I'd be like, what do they sell on G11?
How do you know what your problems might be if you haven't already planted stuff?
Your problems are that you probably have, your soil is wet, so you want drought resilience, and that you have a lot of disease pressure. So I would be, and you probably want smaller trees. So I would be looking for, in order of priority, disease resistance, then water use efficiency, and then size.
Okay.
Like those are all our problems. We all have those problems.
Why size?
Why size? Because I'm only so tall. It's a height problem. Yeah. So do your research, and we are a resource, right? We are a resource. Like my job is literally to answer these questions from you, right? I'm here professionally, you guys. Reach out with questions. We always want to hear from you. The master gardeners always want to hear from you, and we'll riddle through some of this together. And two people can have the exact same question and come to a different answer because they're prioritizing different things, and that's fine, right? That makes sense. Yeah.
Do you actually have experience with the Auburn plums?
Kat does.
Yeah. And they do well? They do
Very
okay?
much, yes.
Oh, okay, good.
I think there sometimes from what I read, there can be a little bit of a trade-off with flavor, but this is like something I talk about a lot where I'm like, a real fruit that survived is always better than a hypothetical perfect fruit. Yeah, like, way tastier than what should have made it. Yeah.
The Bruce plum has done well. The half Chickasaw,
Yeah.
I've had experience with, but I've not tried these.
Yeah. Okay, and so finally, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of speed just because I don't want to cut into Sarah's time. Chilling hours. So this is really all about how plants know when to flower, right? And so it's the number of cold weather that a type or variety of plant needs to then flower, right? So for many plants, it's not just that they flower when it warms up. It's like they had to get a certain amount of cold first, and then they had to have a warm-up period. And a chilling hour is really specifically hours between 32 degrees and 45 degrees. So over freezing, but still cold. And when that starts, the plant starts accumulating chilling hours. And then the moment you get that warm period, it's gonna try and flower, right? This is why we always see like a deranged ornamental peach or plum tree flowering in like January, right? Our area receives about 800 to 1,000 chilling hours, and it does vary regionally. So if we're kind of right here in this band, we're kind of right on the edge, but there's Raleigh. If you were to go much further north, right, you're gonna receive a lot more cold. If you're gonna go south, you'd receive a lot further cold. So you can't just buy plants from anywhere. You need to buy plants that are kind of specifically developed for that sort of range. You can look online and you can see where we are with chilling hours and how that applies to different specific fruit. There are a whole bunch of chilling hour calculators online. I did find one, and I'll share these slides. We'll share all of our slides so you don't need to write anything down. From NC State, where if I looked at, this was for apples, I looked at it 2 days ago, and we've so far had 1,000 hours as an apple would see it. And this is kind of what we forecast to have in the next window, right? So you can really have a sense of where we are. And it's just kind of a fun nerd tool to play with, right? So you can kind of go 2 ways with this information. You can either pick varieties that require 800 to 1,000, and I would say closer to that 1,000 range for chilling hours, right? To make sure that you're not going to get plants that either bloom way too early or never get enough chilling hours if they don't like to bloom at all, right? That they're kind of in this sweet spot. Or be very aware of this, and you need to take advantage of things like microclimates, right? So if you are in a more urban area like we are, this is a brick building with a bunch of sidewalk around it. If I tried to plant a tree on the south side of this building with that brick behind it and all the pavement around it, it would stay significantly warmer than you would if I were in the northern part of the county. So what does that mean? It means I'm probably going to get fewer chilling hours, right? Because I'm not going to hit those low temperatures for quite as long. But also when it starts warming up, unless I get a really cold, hard frost, it might not get frosted the way we do in the northern part of the county, right? So I might be able to grow some weird tropicals down here. And it's not going to be perfect, and I might lose them every once in a while, but I could try it, right? I could try it. And I would probably have pretty good success.
Is Myers lemon kind of fall in that category?
Citrus is gonna like typically be in the like weird tropicals that like just steal your heart, but like it might work. I don't know where olives fall. Do you know? I think of olives as being Mediterranean though, and things I know about Mediterranean climate is that they have very dry periods in the summer, and so I would worry about water in the roots.
There's one variety that you can plant in this area, but nothing else.
Yeah, but we can look into it more for sure. So if you're gonna go either of these routes, just think about where you are, what your house is like. Are you in an urban center down here where it's actually a fair bit warmer? Or are you in the northern part of the county or a rural part of the county, right? Are you thinking about planting out in the middle of an open area, or are you thinking about planting right up next to a stone wall, right? Stone, asphalt, pavement, these things are heat sinks that take in heat during the day, radiate it out at night, keep things a little bit warmer and a little bit more mild, right? Like I'm not saying it turns it into like the Bahamas, but it'll buy you a couple degrees, right? Because really what our concern is that if a tree blooms too early and a frost comes, it kills the flowers and you get no fruit that year, right? So we're trying to figure out how to balance that. So putting it all together, and this is kind of like my true assessment here, nothing will fix the wrong plant in the wrong place. Pick good rootstocks, pick your most amazing variety, pick everything perfect, put it in a waterlogged clay soil, it's gonna die, right? Rootstocks and heat sinks and these kind of things can buy you wiggle room, but you need to make sure that you have good drainage. You need to make sure you have these things taken care of. In urban areas, consider warmer options, right? So consider plants that might want slightly warmer conditions, but be ready to lose blooms in late frosts. But in warm urban areas, you have the benefit of maybe getting to play around with some of these weird tropicals, right? In more rural areas, look for microclimates up against the brick house or anything else like that, but really pick things for chilling hours because you don't get the benefit of kind of that urban heat island, right? And in all areas, ensure good drainage, keep up with adding organic matter, and let plants fail. right? There is always a cool new thing you want to try. This is how you make more room, right? Like, let's have the plants that we know do well and that they succeed. And if you have something you love and it's doing really, really well, sometimes you just plant another one of those, right? Like, sometimes we don't have to resolve that puzzle. So I'm gonna hand it over to Sarah. We're gonna get her all set up, but do we have any questions? And I'll be around too. Yeah.
So when you're talking about the size of trees, the rootstock,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you're not really concerned about how tall they're going to get. With a standard tree, I always hear that they last a lot longer. Are they also healthier, like disease resistance?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And so typically, like, the main place where we see size control through rootstocks is in apples. And the way that it accomplishes that is actually through kind of like a growth efficiency. And so those trees will you won't really see it in overall health. It's just kind of like about size. But that's what I was saying too, is that like they're going back and researching those rootstocks now, and they're finding even dwarfing ones that might have better water use efficiency, right? So you're not going to see it in other places. You're going to see it in size mostly. Does that make sense?
Can you not control the tree for size just by pruning, or do you want that rootstock because it gives you less to prune? As for that one,
you could wall up that tree every year, but that's another one of those things where you set up a system where if you miss it 1 year, you're going to have trouble, or miss it a couple years, you're going to have trouble. Whereas I would rather have something that's going to be overall maturing smaller, because it will also tolerate being kept that size a little bit better. Right? Like, we can bonsai a lot of stuff, but it doesn't mean that like that's how we want to spend our time. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we did that light.
All right, I'm gonna do my speech first, and then we'll do this.
Go for it. I will be.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, like, yeah.
Where does it need to be plugged in?
Right.
I've just been pruning my trees to keep them shorter, so when I finally get to move out, yeah, I did a plant too. I did Chickasaw plum that's going nuts. It needs nothing.
You got me in the dark here.
Oh, I asked her. She went the wrong direction with the lights.
Oh. Hi, I'm Sarah Smith, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about grafting, since this is a grafting and scion workshop. And what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of a background about grafting, and then I'll do a demo on how to do a cleft graft. There are several different types of grafts. And then we'll get into letting you guys do some workshop and play with the grafting, and then we'll go to the scion exchange. And I'm glad that Ashley, who is our ag extension agent, in case she wasn't told that, so, and Kat is our orchardist, so we have a lot of expertise, so I really do, and it's all free. You can call or email anytime, or come over and see us. Grafting is actually a horticultural technique where you take a piece of one tree and a piece of another tree, and you put them together so they grow as one plant. And all grafts will have a scion and a rootstock, and some instances you can use what's called an interstock, and that's called a double work. When you have a scion that you want to graft onto a rootstock that doesn't necessarily go to that, but it will go to something else that will go to that rootstock, you can do that. But we won't get into too much of that. I just wanted to let you know that it was there. And the reason why we have this now is because this is a good time to gather our scions. We want to gather scions when trees are dormant, but it's not necessarily when you want to graft. The ideal time when you want to graft is when the tree is just beginning to come out of dormancy. But you want your scions to stay dormant. So what you'll do when you take your scions home is wrap them up in a piece of plastic and have like a damp towel or a damp piece of cloth around their cut parts, and keep them in the refrigerator. Kat is actually going to send you guys an email when when it's the ideal time to do your grafting. So just keep your scions that you take in the refrigerator until your trees that you're going to graft onto start coming out of dormancy. The only exception we have to this rule is our native pawpaw, and our native pawpaw wants the scion and the rootstock to be both coming out of dormancy. So the best time to do pawpaws is in March. You can also do plants, usually when you're grafting onto a rootstock that's already planted, but you can do this if it's a containerized plant. You can take it in and graft on the indoors, but then after you do your graft, just take it back outside in a protected, unheated area and let it go ahead and sit there and come out of dormancy naturally. It's a combination of a botanical science and an art, so it takes knowledge and skill, which is the reason why when you get a grafted tree, it usually costs more, just because it takes more. And because it's a vegetative method of propagation, that scion is going to retain all of the characteristics that it had when it was on its original tree. So if you take a scion from a gala apple and you put it on a Honeycrisp, that branch is still going to give you gala apples. And it also keeps the maturity that it was at when it was on its original tree, which will come in really handy later on. Let's see. The other part of it is that, as Ashley was explaining, the rootstock also keeps similar characteristics. So that's where you get the height of the tree, and that's where you get your disease resistance. And one of the examples that I think is probably my favorite is the Asian persimmon, because Kat introduced me to an Asian persimmon a couple of years ago, and I fell in love. I mean, it's the best fruit I've ever had. But if we planted an Asian persimmon in our soil, I mean, it wouldn't even last a year. But we have a native persimmon, so we can take the Asian persimmon that will give us that wonderful fruit and put it on our native persimmon rootstock that has the disease resistance that we need, and there you go. So let's talk a little bit. Somebody asked what could be grafted onto what. It really has to be compatible, and the compatibility gets better if you look at the scientific name of a plant. You've got the family, and then in that family you have several genera, and then in each genus you have several species. So the closer you get to that third tier, the better your chances that it will be compatible. You cannot graft a watermelon onto a rose. It's been done, it's been proven, it won't work. And in an example that will work is in the family Rosacea. You have a pear, and you also have a quince. Now the pear is in the genus Pyrus, and the quince is in the genus Cydonia. But because they're in the same family, they are one of the ones that are compatible. So a pear and a quince will work. If you get further down into the genus, then you have an even better chance. And if you get down to the same family, the same genus, and the same species, or two different species, then you know for sure that it's going to work. That's why you can easily graft apple onto apple. And some of the reasons that you graft onto it is, there's several reasons why you want to do that. So one of them is I'm a big cuttings propagator. I'll take, whenever I go over to somebody's house, I've got my pruners in my back pocket. Always ask permission before you cut. But some things just don't root very well. Cuttings just don't root very well, and fruit trees is one of them. And even if you get a fruit tree to root, it's going to take at least a year for it to root well enough to be planted out. And then you've got several years before you're even going to get any fruit from it. So that's where grafting is going to do much better. you may also have limited space. When I first started my little orchard, of course, I knew about this much about orchards. I was just all excited because Kat had an orchard, so I wanted an orchard. And I started with a bunch of apple trees, and I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to have all these apple trees. Well, I planted apple trees that bloom at different times, so they weren't cross-pollinating with each other. And then I found out that a crab apple will pollinate over, will bloom over a long period of time, and it's a really good pollinator for apples. But I didn't have the room by that time in my little bitty orchard for another tree. So what I did is I got a bunch of crabapple scions and I grafted crabapple scions to each one of the trees, and now I get apples. They're not very pretty, but I get them. Another reason is that you may want to change cultivars in your orchard. Now this is usually done on commercial orchards, but it may happen with our urban orchards, is that if an orchardist wants to change the cultivar of apples that they're growing, they don't want to go in and pull up all their mature trees and start all over again. So what they will do is they will use grafting to change the cultivar of the trees that they have in their orchard. And you can do the same thing. I had one of our master gardeners had those Bartlett pears. When she moved into her house, she had, well, I think it was 2 Bartlett pears, and she wanted to get rid of them. So what she did is she came to the scion exchange and she got pear scions, and she cut those trees off and grafted the pear scions onto the Bartlett pears. And now she has edible pears. It's also a good way to obtain the more artistic forms, like the weeping cherry. Usually the weeping trees that we get, those are grafted trees. Which is the reason why they cost more. Now there's several types of grafting, and I would urge you, we have a book that is NCSU, what's the name of it? The handbook, NCSU handbook. Look up NCSU handbook, it's a great big handbook. If you want a hard copy, it'll cost you, but it's right there online, so it's full of information, and it has a good chapter on grafting. So today, what I'm going to show you is how to do a cleft graft, which is what a lot of people use when they just want to graft a scion onto an existing tree. Okay? How do I turn this on?
It is on.
It is on?
You are all set up.
Oh, I'm on. Okay. I told Ashley, I said I should get a better thing to put my tools in, but this is my field box. It's easy to carry. First thing that you want to do when you're going out to the field to graft is to take your alcohol or whatever else you want and just put a little spritz on it just to keep it, you know, you're going to be cutting into the vascular system of your trees. You don't want to introduce any diseases to it. So you're going to have, we're going to pretend like this is what's on the tree. So this is my rootstock right here. First thing that you're going to want to do if you take your scion home is you're going to have to decide which way is up. Even if you just have a separate piece like this, you have to know, because you have to graft your scion onto your rootstock in the same direction as it was growing on the tree. So I'm going to pull some of these things off. Now the next thing that you have to do is decide what you're going to use as a scion. And don't throw any part of it away, because you can make scions out of this. What you want is 3 or 4 growing buds on your above where you're going to do your graft.
What kind of tree you got there?
This is a crepe myrtle. So there's 3 right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut between these 2 right here for my scion. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to go over to my branch, and I want to find a place that is exactly the same width as this scion. And I'm obviously not going to be able to do that because this one is too big. If the goal of a graft is for you to get the cambium layer lined up with the cambium layer of your rootstock, And so if you can't find one that matches completely, get one that's a little bit bigger and then move it over to the side. Don't try to put it right in the middle, move it to the side so at least one side is lined up. All right, so here's where the skill comes in. I've got this branch coming out like this on the tree. And I'm going to take this scion. Can I get it to stand up there? Yeah. I'm going to take this scion and I'm going to say, okay, I've got 2 buds coming out here, and this bud is the bud that I want to continue to grow. So I'm looking at my tree, and this one's coming out away from the center, so that's good. That's the reason why I got that one. And I know that when I make my cleft in this, that I'm going to make the cleft going horizontal to the ground. And the reason for that is, all right, so here's my cleft in my tree, in my rootstock, and here's my scion. If I make it vertical, is it vertical to it? If I make it vertical and I slip my scion in like this, and then a bird comes and sits on my scion, it's going to break my graft. So we're going to do it horizontal to the ground, slip the scion in there, and then if a bird comes and sits on it, it's going to go down like this. All right, so we've got our tree. I've got the bud. I've picked my bud out. That's the bud. I was going to say, is that the right one? Did I lose it? There it is. All right, and I've got my bud. I like this bud, and I want it to be coming out of the top, okay? So I've got my bud. I know my slit's going to be this way, and that determines how I'm going to do my wedge. So I know my wedge is going to be here and here, not here and here. So the next thing you want to do is take your knife, or you can do a razor blade, and put a wedge on this exactly the way you want it. And the way I like to do it, you can do it any way that you're comfortable with, but the way that I like to do it, make sure I got this the right way, is I like to, I'm doing this wrong, I like to hold my knife at an angle, and then when I move, I'm going to move only my shoulders. My wrists, my hands, and my elbows are going to stay exactly straight, and I'm going to cut. And that gives me a good smooth straight there, and then I can do it over and do the other cut. And that gives me a good wedge. Now you see I've got a hole in that wedge. Feel free to go ahead and get it a little bit better and cut it like this. And then you've got your wedge. Once you have a nice straight wedge.
Can you use the camera?
Yep.
Thank you.
I can show you in this camera what I've done. See that wedge? Then once you have your wedge, what you're going to do is, on your table you have we didn't have enough gloves for everybody, so please share with your partner the glove. But where did my thing go? Oh, there it is. On your table you each have one of these. This is a special tool for grafters. You can get it at Lowe's. You're going to put this on the end. I'm going to cut these off. We've only had one person cut their hand, and that was a medical student. And it might be me. Slip this over here, and that's going to help hold your, that's going to help with this. Whoops. I got it. So put that on your hand. I'll hold it up. And so what happens is, if you put too much pressure when you're making this cleft, anytime you put too much pressure on a branch, its tendency is to go ahead and split. And when it does, you're going to go down. And this will protect your hands. So I don't want to put any pressure on this, none. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it where I want it, and then I'm going to start rocking back and forth. And I'm not putting any pressure on there, and you can see that it's making my wedge. Just back and forth, very gently. Keep going back and forth until you get as far down as you want. And once you get as far down as you want, you can pull it out. And then you can take your wedge and take this off of it, of course. And you might have to help your wedge open. Shoot, I lost my wedge. All right, there. I usually just stick my thumb in there or something and get that wedge to open, and then, or the cleft to open, and then push the wedge in. Is it not doing it?
That's good.
I'm wiggling. It's good that it's tight, but it does sometimes make it difficult. And I'm going to move my cleft over to the side. So here we go. Can you get it? Yeah. See how close I got that? It's not lined up on both sides, it's lined up on just one side. But I've got it on one side. Then the next thing that we want to do is get our rubber band. There's my rubber band. And we're going to lash this together with the rubber band.
Are we supposed to be doing it with you?
No, you can wait if you want to. You can wait or you can do it. It really doesn't matter. Now that's going to keep that together for a little bit, but the next thing that we want is we want to use this, this is called paraffin tape, grafting tape, and we are going to cover the entire thing from the top of it all the way down. And I'm just going to start here and start wrapping it. And as you wrap it, pull it a little bit, pull it a little tight, and it'll kind of stick to itself when you pull it really tight.
Are you covering up the buds?
Covering up the buds and everything, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. Sometimes, once you cut your scion, once you get your scion cut, if you'll go ahead and wrap it with this material, it makes it a lot easier to do instead of waiting until you've got it off.
Sarah, can you show it under the camera so they can see it? So we can
Yeah,
from the top.
I'm not doing a very good job of this.
You're
so.
fine.
And I'm going to go back. You see, I've missed a couple of places, so I'm going to go back and wrap those too. I'm just going to try and get down here and get my graft straight.
Okay, why are you wrapping the whole thing? I missed that part.
Why am I doing what?
Why do you wrap the whole length of the scion?
The whole length is because it's going to transpire, remember? And we don't want it to transpire until it's completely filled, completely healed. So this whole thing has to be completely waterproof. Now, as the year goes on and this is out in the sun, don't worry about taking this paper off. Don't worry about taking the tape off. Don't worry about the rubber band. Everything will degenerate. So just leave it there. Don't worry about it. I always say that you will know when your graft is taken on the second year. First year it may just leaf out and look beautiful, but you really won't know if it took until it leaves out on the second spring. You've got those two little ones sticking out. Now, if you're using you won't have this sticking out if you're grafting on your trees. This is a crepe myrtle, so it's being a little obstinate. And then when you get finished, just wrap it up like that. Oh, it's not gonna stick. If it doesn't stick, like this doesn't want to stick, just take a piece of tape or something and wrap around that end. Ah, there we go. It takes some practice, it takes a little practice, but you can do it.
the
Yep.
side?
So, oh, yes, very good. Once you have your graft on your tree, what you're going to do is you have to make a label, and I say you have to make a label because this is one of the things that I have learned
That's why I remember.
by not making a label. And what I found, and I'm missing, yeah, there it is. What I found is that if you use a piece of this, and we've left it there, and it just came off of a pie plate. We just cut it out of a pie plate. Use a ballpoint pen and mark your label on this with the ballpoint pen, and it just puts it right in the tin, so it won't fade. And then I just take a little hole punch, and you can use whatever you want.
That's a good idea.
But I just put a hole in it and then tie it onto the branch that's grafted further down. The only thing you have to worry about is that branch is going to be getting bigger, so every once in a while you need to go out there and make sure that you loosen up where it's tied to. And the other thing that you want to make sure about is, see these things that are growing out on the rootstock? Make sure that anything that's growing out on the rootstock is cut off. We don't want any energy going into other branches here. We want it all going up this way. Okay? Yes?
So I've read or always been told, I think, for fruit trees that 1 year growth is the best.
1 year
to
growth
use?
is the best
Yeah,
for scions.
For
to-
scion,
To
okay.
take the scions,
Good.
yes. To take the scions.
Sarah, is there a maximum branch size and a minimum branch size you want to use for grafting?
Yeah, the ideal, the question is there a maximum branch size and a minimum branch size? And the ideal is about the size of a pencil. That's the ideal. A little bit more, a little bit less is okay, but that's the ideal.
Clarification, on one side, you're making a wedge, kind of like a Y, and the other side is the actual wedge. It's
Right.
not two Ys.
No, it's not two Ys, it's a cleft and a wedge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The timing on comparing the scion versus the rootstock. The rootstock needs to be coming out of dormancy,
Yes,
but then the scion needs to still be dormant.
right. You need to keep it dormant by keeping it in the refrigerator.
Okay.
And we are going to send you guys an email when it comes time to do your scions.
It's looking like, when I insert the wedge, it's like cracking the cleft a little bit.
You may have to cut down a little bit then.
Cut down a little bit.
Cut a little further down.
And then is there gonna be air gaps, like at the bottom of where that is cut?
It might be the tiniest little one, but the most important is to get the cambium layers lined up.
And that's just inside. the
Right,
cleft,
and that's
basically.
one of the reasons why you have to wrap it up with that paraffin tape so tightly.
Great.
Yeah.
Can we increase the contact with the cambium by putting it a little bit diagonal?
No, you have to keep it on one side because that gives you the most coverage.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, the Master Gardener propagation team is here to help and they're going to be wandering around. So if you have any questions, just grab one of us and we'll help you.